Elf thinks he's just a little kitten, but in truth, he's a devastating monster. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. A man wakes up in a strange cave and has no idea how he ended up there. As he ponders this, he recalls being struck down by a demon's sword and dying. Thus, this must be a reincarnation, although he has no clue how it happened or what he has become. Amidst his confusion, he accesses his system menu and discovers he has reincarnated as an S-rank behemoth creature. Such monsters are known in human literature as so perilous that an entire army is required to defeat just one. Considering that in his past life he was a warrior who swore his sword in the name of humanity's protection, the man feels a tremendous internal conflict. Nevertheless, as he approaches a lake in the cave, the behemoth looks at his reflection in the water and sees only a small kitten. At this, he lets out a scream that could be heard throughout the city. The next morning, as the sun rises on the horizon, an elf enthusiastically opens the window of her room, changes clothes to go out, but not before grabbing her two swords. Back in the cave, the kitten cannot believe that from a noble knight fighting for humanity, he has become a pet. However, he feels he might be thankful for having been granted a second life. Later, he encounters a slime, a typical E-rank creature. Being a cat, he worries the creature might try to eat him, so he accesses his menu in search of a useful skill in this moment of danger. Among a few options, he chooses Stone Howl and hits the wandering jelly squarely. Afterwards, his stomach growls, making the feline realize he hasn't eaten anything since coming back to life. Starving, he approaches the defeated slime, sniffs it for a moment, and takes a bite. To his surprise, the taste is much better than expected, and that's not all. Besides feeding, the cat discovers he is capable of stealing the skills of his prey. Amidst this, the feline's personal storage manifests and absorbs the slime's carcass, giving him the chance to save the rest of the monster for later. Meanwhile, the elf takes a boat and crosses a river to the entrance of an arena resembling the Colosseum. At the door, two guards block her path, but she shows a golden necklace that grants her entry. Returning to the kitten, he has just defeated a B-rank wyvern and steals his flying ability. Next, he encounters a C+ rank minotaur and also finishes it off, securing the skills Fireball and Ice Lance. Afterwards, he easily defeats a B-rank golem and inexplicably consumes the stone and awakens the iron body skill. Following this, his victim is a venomous snake of C rank, which gives him the Poison Fang technique. In the meantime, the elf advances until she reaches a spot where she places a magic stone that sustains the corridor's illumination. Speaking of illumination, the kitten soon finds a treasure chest shining in front of him, something he had never encountered in his entire life as a knight. Inside is a beautiful red stone, but a strange sound makes the animal think it's a trap. However, it turns out to be a teleportation crystal, which suddenly transports him elsewhere. The feline spends a few seconds not knowing where he is until a tremor occurs and he realizes he's on the back of an S-rank earth dragon. With a feminine voice, the creature sentences the cat to death for interrupting her rest, then attacks the small one with her tail. Undeterred, the cat escapes death and retaliates with Stone Howl. Obviously, the projectile hardly tickles the dragoness, but it bounces off the monster scale and knocks down some larger stones that nearly cause a collapse. Then, before being crushed by the dragoness, the cat activates his iron body and protects himself from a blow, but the force is so great that it cracks the shield and hits the user, leaving him close to death with severe bleeding. To end the fight, the dragoness throws all her weight onto the cat, but a cut occurs in her eye while the cat escapes with his wyvern wings after using his Ether Edge skill. In another corner, the elf advances down the corridor but stops and draws her two swords. This stance reminds her of a scene where she was very young and admired an older elf who had an unparalleled ability to defeat her enemies. Back to the cat, the wound in his belly sheds much blood. After a long walk, he nears the dungeon's exit but collapses on the ground from lack of strength. At that moment, he sees a shadow approaching the corridor. For that reason, he believes this is his end, but in reality, it was the elf who just stumbled upon him along the way. Concerned, she rushes to help the animal. Sometime later, he wakes up in a bed, body full of bandages. When the elf brings something for him to eat, the man reborn as a beast thinks this woman might be some kind of angel. She plays with the cat's snout while he cannot understand how she did not see that he was a monster. Nevertheless, even as days pass, the woman never stops caring for the animal with everything at her disposal, whether feeding or treating the wounds with the medications and bandages she had at home. One day, she puts out milk for the kitten and leaves to take care of something. Full of life, the creature reflects that this elf took care of him with love, health, bed, and food. Thus, he begins to see her as his master, the person who saved his life and who deserves to be protected by him forever. Therefore, to not stray too far from the one he needs to defend, the cat hurriedly descends and jumps into the boat where the elf was without anyone noticing. Later, they arrive at the same dungeon that the woman usually explores and where the animal was found. As she follows her path, he follows hers unnoticed. After all, he fears her being in a dangerous situation and having no one to turn to, especially being a woman alone in this cruel place. Further ahead, in a corridor occupied by 3 goblins, the elf casts her acceleration spell and dispatches her foes with ease. Afterward, she cuts off the monster's ears. Watching this, the cat had never seen anyone move so swiftly, although his master seemed to limit her speed due to the weight of her swords. Amid this, another goblin emerges in the room, not a typical warrior of its kind, but a mage who launches a fireball at the adversary. Realizing his master is about to become a barbecue, the cat dashes forward and pushes her to the ground. Subsequently, as he cannot reveal his true identity, the feline resorts to his trusty old Scratch to attack the goblin like a normal animal. Scratched, the monster loses balance and tumbles down the stairs. After this bizarre scene, puzzled, the elf asks what her little pet is doing there. Regardless, the two head home by late afternoon. During the journey, the kitty receives special affection inside the boat, making him feel as though he's in the warmest, most welcoming paradise imaginable. Soon, in the commercial district, they reach the Adventurers Guild, where everyone gazes at Aria at the elf's arrival and as always are charmed, wishing they were the cat she carries between her pair of water balloons. One of the men, named Lord Casman, approaches to woo the girl and asks if she has reconsidered joining his group. Once again, she declines, but the man persists in an ungentlemanly manner, promising to take good care of her. When the kitty sees the man reaching out to his master, he leaps and bites him. Lord Casman reacts, and the feline totally loses it and scratches the human's face, who also loses his cool and draws his sword against the cat. At that moment, the man charges at the cat, but the receptionist, Arnold Holzweisenegger, prevents him from behaving aggressively inside the guild. Pretending to have another commitment, Casman gives the perfect excuse to leave as quickly as possible. Then, Aria thanks her great friend Anna, as she calls Arnold. Besides her, the other adventurers also praise the receptionist's attitude. Aside from that, Anna notices that Aria is carrying a new little friend as if he were a knight in shining armor protecting his princess. Speaking of which, the elf explains that this kitty saved her twice. For that reason, she decides to name the little one Tama, having officially adopted him as a pet. Hearing this, Tama realizes he will have a permanent home and no longer needs to struggle in random caves. Subsequently, Aria hands over the goblin's ears, proving she completed her mission. Given the adventurer's results, Anna assures that Aria will soon be promoted. After settling the matter, Aria takes a moment to pet Tama, but as she ended up in a particularly sensitive spot on the animal's body, he didn't react well, causing quite a commotion. Hours later, the elf is drunk, complaining that her kitty doesn't pay attention to her. She says that if Tama doesn't correct his behavior, he won't be allowed to bathe with his master. After the scolding, Tama is indeed taken to bathe with the woman. Although he always tries to act like a noble knight and not look at the elf undressed, he encounters several obstacles along the way. In the midst of the bath, Aria asks if she will ever be strong, since a long time ago, the place where she was born was attacked by demons. However, someone named Holy Sword appeared and saved the village from danger. Since that day, Aria promised to be strong like that savior. Hearing this story, Tama knows that the Holy Sword is called Alicia, the heroine of Ragnarok. To comfort his master, he approaches and caresses her face. Another day, as they walk through the streets, Tama is impressed by how well-known Aria is, with everyone eager to speak with her. When they arrive at the guild, Anna tells the elf to leave while she can, but Lord Casman arrives in time to show a documented order from the Baron, demanding that the elf's cat be sacrificed for injuring Casman. Aria begs for mercy, then Casman proposes a duel to settle this mess. If Aria wins, the cat is spared the sentence. On the other hand, if Casman wins, the elf will become his wife. With no escape, the woman accepts the terms. At night, before the fight begins, being rank C, Casman acknowledges that his opponent is a rank below him, therefore allows her to receive outside help. That is, if anyone agrees, Aria can have someone fight alongside her. Initially, no one volunteers to help the elf until Tama shows up ready to save his master once again. Casman finds it amusing, but Anna reminds Aria that this kitty truly is a knight in shining armor. When the fight starts, Tama knows that knocking down this opponent without using his abilities is nearly impossible, but he must find a way. Aria activates her acceleration, but Casman dodges and kicks her rib with force. The elf retaliates with kunai, but the man protects himself with his durable cape. Amidst their duel, the man remarks that her hand would look much better with a kitchen knife than with that sword. In the midst of this, Tama is itching to not throw a fireball or an ice spear at this guy's forehead. Suddenly, Casman disarms Aria and starts drooling with desire, being close to having the elf as his wife. He advances for the blow that will decree victory. However, Tama blocks the sword with iron body. Then, with other howl, the cat makes the human fly away. To worsen Kazman's situation, he is struck by a stray sword right in the groin. Finally, despite the victory, now Tama must deal with the repercussions of his actions, as everyone will know he is a behemoth. Imagining that he will certainly be killed, the kitty doesn't mind, as the greatest honor for a knight is to protect his master, and this he did masterfully. However, everyone around celebrates the possibility of Tama being an elemental cat, while Anna declares Arya the victor. The next day, Tama reflects that this is really happening. He is an S-rank behemoth but was mistaken and is living as a pet cat of an elf. The next day, the kitten wakes up on his favorite pillow and snuggles up to his owner's face, but he doesn't stop there. As the elf herself asks for a little more affection, he feels encouraged to give her pointy ear a gentle lick, which elicits a strange moan from her. Startled by what happened, Tama jumps off the bed and looks back at Arya, who looks incredibly thrilled and animated as she asks the cat for more gentle nuzzles. Later, they head to Vulcan Ferreira, where they're warmly welcomed by the feline. Tama notices her tiger ears and is utterly astonished, while Vulcan approaches the kitten after having heard so much about him. Then, Arya formally introduces her pet. The blacksmith asks to hold him for a bit, so the elf places the creature where she always carries him, but this time on top of her friend. As they do, both women are charmed by the kitten's adorable antics, who thinks he must be dreaming as there's no rational explanation for everything he's experiencing. Then Vulcan asks what she can do for her partner, reminding her that she's still working on the weapon she left there. Arya explains that she needs extra durable armor for Tama, and since Vulcan loves making gear for creatures, she accepts the challenge immediately. She takes the animal's measurements to calculate the correct size. Since Tama is still growing, she plans to include adjustable magic in the garment. While the blacksmith works, Arya asks if her kitten would like to join her on an adventure. Tama promises to protect his master as his knightly vows demand. All night, Vulcan works on the animal's armor until it's ready. When Tama wears it the next day, Arya is enchanted by the cuteness of the creature, while the cat is amazed that the blacksmith managed to construct all this gear in just one day. Vulcan shares that the real problem has been Arya's swords, as she can't make them lighter at all, and they're likely to break at any moment. Arya laments this, as the blacksmith had reforged these weapons so many times before, but the elf still struggles to wield both as she'd like. Considering this, Vulcan suggests forming a temporary group, as watching Arya use the sword in combat would allow her to analyze the problem more closely and find a solution. Without delay, the team is formed, and Vulcan demonstrates the power of her hammer on the first unsuspecting goblin that shows its face in the dungeon. Terrified, the second monster attacks, but is crushed by the blacksmith in the blink of an eye. Watching the scene, Tama is impressed by the strength of this woman. Indeed, he had always heard of the extraordinary strength of the tiger people, but seeing it live is another story. Amidst this, a third goblin emerges and casts a fire spell on the Catwoman, but she easily resists and retaliates with enchanted flames, a fiery fist she uses to pierce the monster and eliminate it outright. Arya asks what that ability is, and Vulcan explains that it's an enchanted skill she derived from her knowledge of the forge, allowing her to wrap different elements around her armor. Then an orc appears down the dungeon corridor, and Vulcan says it's time for Arya to shine. The elf trembles and confesses she doesn't feel ready for this, but still gathers the courage necessary to draw her swords and go into battle. She lunges with her acceleration skill and strikes, but the orc blocks and counterattacks. Trembling for his master, Tama intervenes with his iron body and makes the monster break its axe on his magical shield. With the path clear, Arya attacks again and ends the battle, but she seems sad. Realizing this, Tama imagines his owner isn't feeling so victorious. Vulcan approaches and, after observing the fight, mentions that the long swords have thrown Arya off balance, hindering her movements. With this, the elf begs to know more, as she wants to become stronger. In this case, her friend mentions that the next floor of this dungeon has the perfect monster for that. Upon reaching it and seeing that the Catwoman was talking about the Ropers, D-level weak monsters, Arya can't hide her frustration. At the same time, Tama is concerned these creatures might ensnare his master with their tentacles in an unwanted way. Against this creature, Vulcan states that Arya will have no choice but to pay attention to her own movements, which will help her develop this skill. Thus defined, Arya rushes the first roper with acceleration, but is forced to retreat when the monster reacts with its tentacles. Watching the fight, Tama realizes his master won't be able to get close with her usual movements. Then Arya takes a hit and sees her right-hand sword knocked down. Nonetheless, she doesn't give up and continues the fight with her last weapon. In fact, she's moving much faster now, as with one less sword, the weight is significantly reduced. From this moment, the elf balances the fight and manages to attack the roper, while more efficiently dodging its tentacles. However, at one point in the battle, the monster breaks the blade of the opponent, leaving her unarmed. Then Vulcan throws a dagger and the broken blade to her friend, who wastes no time and drives both weapons into the creature, finally defeating it. Then the elf turns to the second target and charges at it with acceleration, moving even faster than before with just one sword. Seeing the roper's attack slow, Aria realizes she's found the reason for her difficulty. As she quickly approaches the enemy, she delivers several stabs and cuts off some of its tentacles, but the holes created expel a substance that nearly completely covers her. Visibly upset, Aria declares that such actions are reserved for Tama alone and charges at the roper with triple of fury. This time, she doesn't just cut all the tentacles of the creature, but also splits its body in half. Having done this, the elf names this new move Wind Blade. After the master's victory, Tama runs toward her, delighted that she had developed a skill so quickly, especially once she used equipment that truly made sense for her style. And speaking of which, since the roper's corpse was lying around, the kitten sees an opportunity to steal its abilities, so he bites the monster. At first, Tama tastes the terribly bitter flavor of that wretched creature, but at least he acquires the abilities to summon tentacles, infinite mucus spray, and crossbreeding. In the midst of this, Aria is still stabbing the monster's corpse, still angry that it did something that only Tama is allowed to do. After the battle, Aria mentions that she adopted 2 long swords in honor of the Sword Saint, but she really doesn't get along well with them. On the other hand, these short weapons fit perfectly with her style. Agreeing with the master, Tama gently strokes her face. According to Vulcan, Aria is now able to delve even deeper into this dungeon. But before she does, the blacksmith suggests the group take a break. For this, the blacksmith leads the group to a safe spot inside the cave, kept monster-free thanks to the Philosopher's Stone. Upon seeing this magical stone, Aria is thrown back to the memory of her village being attacked, but she sets that aside to clean up after the ordeal with the roper. Since there was water in that part of the dungeon, the elf takes the opportunity to have a good bath and removes her armor. Seeing this, Tama turns away immediately, for a knight must never let his passions govern his mind. By the way, the master calls her pet to bathe with her, and he ends up entering the water with the 2 women. Aria asks Vulcan about her main group's status. The blacksmith confesses that they have split up, as some have changed priorities and others have gotten pregnant. Speaking of which, the blacksmith tells her friend to keep an eye out because elemental cats can crossbreed with other creatures. And speaking of which, Tama immediately remembers that he acquired the crossbreeding ability earlier, and that had nothing to do with soccer. Vulcan adds that when Tama grows and becomes frisky, no one will be able to hold him back, and he might even steal a moment with Aria herself. Tama promises silently that he would never do that, although the elf thinks it's a wonderful idea. She asks her kitten to grow up as fast as possible so she can have a meow out with him before everyone else. Finally, the group continues their journey and encounters a C+ rank minotaur along the way. The elf is scared because of the high level of the monster, but Vulcan assures her that she will be watching the fight if necessary and that this will be her friend's final test. With that, Aria accepts the challenge and charges at the minotaur. Confident, she uses the Wind Blade, but the effect is far from expected as it barely injures the enemy. Seeing that the situation is worse than expected, Vulcan intervenes with her hammer, but the bull defends itself with its shield. Then Aria attacks several times with her new ability. Although not strong against the opponent, it wasn't fast enough to catch her. On the 3rd attack, the elf manages to hit the minotaur's eyes, causing it to hit its club against the wall and cause a collapse on Vulcan. To prevent a tragedy, Tama uses the Ether Howl to scatter the rocks and save his ally. After that, Aria advances again and pierces the minotaur's chest, ending the duel. Having done that, the woman can hardly believe she defeated a C+ rank monster. In turn, Vulcan surrenders to the power of the male cat that saved her so heroically. At night, the group returns to the guild and hands over the items collected to Anna, who is moved to see her elf friend being able to defeat such difficult enemies. Then it's time to celebrate with a good drink at the tavern. Happy with the outcome of the expedition, Vulcan invites her friends to form a definitive group, but that wasn't all. Embarrassed, she says that someone needs to keep Tama's armor in top shape. At this, the cat grabs the master's hand and touches it to the blacksmith's hand, signaling that the proposal should be accepted. Now with the team officially formed, the celebration will ramp up. By the way, Aria and Vulcan drank so much that they passed out on top of each other in bed, crushing poor Tama between them. Unable to move, the cat also can't sleep, so he listens to the two dreaming some strange things involving felines. Unbelieving what he's hearing, Tama focuses within his mind, and this leads him to his status evaluation, where there was an option to evolve to a second form. In view of this, the cat wonders if he will finally assume the form of a behemoth that everyone can recognize, as this could force his master to abandon him. On the other hand, if he can always stay as a little kitten, he can stay by Aria's side forever. The next day, Tama is still in the form of a kitten until he and his master see two men beating a defenseless little girl, accusing her of being a thief. Aria approaches the two, and they notice that on her shoulder is the elemental cat that finished off Casman so they run off without a second thought. Arya helps the little girl, asks her name and where her parents are. The girl's name is Lala, but she lowers her head when asked about her parents. Thus, the elf invites the little girl to accompany her. Along with Lala, Arya goes to a church where several children recognize the elf and are happy with her presence. Inside the church, a nun promises to take care of Lala, while Tama admires his master for caring so much about these children. For this reason, he reinforces his promise to protect the elf and everything she also fights to defend. In the late afternoon, alongside Vulcan, the duo goes to the Adventurers Guild, where Anna grants the C-rank title to Arya. However, despite the moment of joy, the receptionist shares that several disappearances have been occurring in the city of Leonard, all due to demons, and no one has ever returned to date. Upon hearing this story, Arya asks Anna everything she knows about the case. Vulcan was concerned about the elf's eagerness to resolve the situation, as it seemed far beyond what she could handle. However, Arya remained convinced that if nothing was done, more people would become victims. Seeing her friend's determination, the blacksmith offered her help for whatever was needed. Anna added that given the circumstances, the two fighters would likely be recruited by some Meg company. At that moment, a young man in a tunic entered the guild to explain what was happening. His name was Cedric Ruin, and when he revealed his face, all the adventurers recognized him as the eldest son of the Duke, a family known for managing labyrinths. Cedric greeted Vulcan after a long time and assured her and her elven companion that they would soon be comrades on the battlefield. Tama also remembered who Cedric Ruin was. Years ago, the Devil's Twilight had descended upon this world. A war known as Ragnarok was fought between men and demons. Despite the irreplaceable losses, humanity won this conflict through the efforts of a young boy known as the Grand Mage. With his vast power, the wizard was capable of annihilating endless ranks of creatures, leading his allies to victory and becoming one of the historic heroes of the battlefield. Despite the buzz around this boy, Arya questioned if their group was too small to face unknown demons and monsters. Smitten with the young man, Anna quickly assured her that Cedric could impress anyone when he wanted to. With that, she pressed herself against him passionately, prompting him to remind her that he had asked her not to do this in public. Enchanted by the romantic scene, Arya asked if the two were a couple, and Vulcan nodded affirmatively, a detail Tama didn't know how to interpret. Speaking of the protagonist, who had been quiet until then, after returning home, he noticed his master was very anxious about what was about to happen, which was understandable. After all, they would travel alongside heroes to face great dangers. The cat licked the elf's face, which she took as his attempt to cheer her up somehow. In response, the elf kissed the cat on the mouth. Caught off guard, Tama tried to focus his mind during this delicate moment. Finally, the expeditionary group set off for adventure, and the comrades introduced themselves to the strangers. The man with silver hair was Danny, while the humanoid monster was Howard. The redhead was named Keeney, and the other woman Marietta. Arya introduced Tama, and everyone was charmed by the kitten's cuteness. Without delay, Keeney and Marietta took turns carrying the animal in their body pillows. However, not everything was roses. Right at that moment of relaxation, the carriage stopped its journey due to the threat of a group of orcs on the road. Cedric asked Danny to take action, and the swordsman stepped in front of the monsters and eliminated them all without any difficulty. Vulcan inquired about the skills of this talented fighter, and Kenny explained that he didn't use any. With that, Arya understood the power of the heroes of Ragnarok, while Tama was impressed by this man tearing through orcs without using a single skill. Honestly, he couldn't wait to fight alongside these icons. When night fell, the carriage finally arrived in the village of Leonard, where the residents thanked Master Cedric for his presence. One explained that many villagers had been disappearing. A team had been sent to deal with the demons in the ruins, but none had returned. The night before, they had lost another young girl. Upon hearing this, a trigger went off in Arya, reminding her of an invasion of her old land. According to the leader of the residents, Cedric's knights were the only hope for the people of Leonard. Yet, imagining that the warriors were tired, food was offered to all of them. Without delay, the convoy went to their lodging and shared a respectable meal. Arya wanted to know why her companions had become knights, and Danny explained that his family was poor, and this was how he found to pay off his debts. Similarly, Howard had chosen this path for the same reason. Keeney needed to pay for her sick sister's medication, while Marietta became a knight to free her father from slavery. Hearing each story, Tama noticed they were all very sad motivations, and even Arya felt bad for bringing up the subject. However, the comrades were not all embarrassed by this conversation, quite the contrary, as they had paid their debts to the order and served only themselves on this journey. About this, Cedric Ruin commented that he was not made to love women and, for that reason, could not take on his family's name. Honestly, the Duke's son joined the order because he had nothing else to do. At least it was fun killing various monsters. Hearing the young man's version, the others seemed not to have enjoyed it much. After the meal, it was time for the team to bathe. While the girls took their bath, the boys heard some strange noises from them, and curiosity hit so hard that they decided to peek. However, as soon as they approached the women's bath, Tama was there to protect the maiden's decency and expel the intruders, with the other roar sending Danny and Howard back to where they came from. Seeing his companions return, Cedric tried to understand this fire they had for these things, but the truth was that he simply couldn't. After the bath, the adventurers continued their journey into the depths of the Leonard Labyrinth, where a creature observed the enemy movement within its territory. According to him, as much as they saw themselves as a group of exterminators, these people were nothing more than food served on a platter. Be that as it may, it was time to build his power and put the plan into action. After that statement, it doesn't take long before some monsters appear in the path of the invaders. A pack of rank sea werewolves approaches the warriors. Taking the front line with his enormous shield, the group's tank Howard activates a taunt skill to focus all the enemy's attention on him. This action makes it easier for the other fighters, who spread across the battlefield and take down their foes with low blows and displays of vast swordsmanship, as is the case with Cedric. Watching the carnage, Vulcan acknowledges that the Duke's son is cunning with a blade. Arya doesn't want to let the guys do all the work and steps forward to fight. Similarly, Tama assesses the humanoid wolves armed with weapons and considers using the Ether Roar, but figures it would only slightly delay the opponents. Instead, he decides to improvise with the Water Roar, which pierces the torso of one of the werewolves. After that, he repeats the move and kills 2 more foes, leaving all allies agape at this unlikely show of strength from the little creature. Meanwhile, the monster accompanying the adventurers can't understand how his wolves were killed so easily, especially by that cat, which seems to be an elemental beast. Regardless of the strength of these intruders, the labyrinth's owner cannot allow them to advance, thus he's prepared to use more weapons against them, or if necessary, to intervene personally. Returning to the heroes, everyone is enchanted with the talent of the elemental cat, as indeed they are intriguing creatures. On this, Arya admires the beast so much that she doesn't hide her desire to be overpowered by its strength and to fall victim to a thing or two from the powerful Tama. For his part, even though he feels something odd about this statement, Tama cannot give in to his desires, as Arya is still his master. Next, they invade a room which, according to Cedric Ruin, possesses an extremely oppressive aura. Thinking about this, the man orders his subordinates to stop for a moment. At this time, the lord of this labyrinth presents himself and decrees that the path of these humans ends here. He introduces himself as Beryl Astaroth, a survivor of the demons that humans once slaughtered. Danny accuses the monster of attacking Leonard for revenge, but Astaroth makes it clear that Leonard is just the first step of a much more complex and devastating project. Having said that, he summons his subordinates to battle, and a group of rank trolls present themselves for war. Impressed with the demon's ability to lead such powerful units, Cedric orders his allies to split up before they get surrounded. To disrupt the humans' plans, Astaroth casts a wall of multi-protection, isolating Tama from the rest of the group. Speaking of him, the first troll attacks precisely the elemental cat, who defends himself by tearing off the monster's arm. However, the troll's arm regenerates instantly. Soon, Tama finds himself surrounded by several creatures. Given this, Cedric's team puts the leadership of breaking the siege in their leader's hands. After all, it's their specialty to deal with such things. If that's how it is, Cedric draws his sword and emanates dark magic around it. Laughing, he charges towards 2 trolls and rips them apart, without any chance of regeneration, which removes 2 pieces from the board. Astaroth notices that this is black magic, an art that only the great mage could use during the Ragnarok War. To this, Cedric simply states it's going to be fun, or rather, fun just for him. Tama tries to retaliate with a stone roar, but the rock causes minor damage to the target, which regenerates immediately. Seeing that he's in a dire situation, the cat flees and reflects on an alternative. If he uses his ability to evolve into a second form, he could deal with these trolls in the blink of an eye, but then he wouldn't be Arya's pet anymore. To maintain his feline form, Tama uses the flame roar in such a way that even though the enemies try to regenerate, the fire continues to burn their wounds intensely. Fortunately, the strategy works and the trolls are all defeated. Astaroth can no longer bear this cat decimating his troops, but he has another problem to worry about at the moment. Vulcan appears from behind him and attacks with his hammer. The demon dodges and is targeted by an attack from Arya, but he blocks it with his dagger. The blacksmith attacks again, but Astaroth dodges and mocks the slowness of the heavy hammer. However, the purpose of the blow was to raise dust and obscure the enemy's vision. With this, Arya could take advantage and use her acceleration to gain an advantage and stab her knife into the demon's chest. He imagined that this would accomplish nothing, however. A light emanates from the elf's blade and amplifies the damage. Just before falling to the ground, Astaroth strikes with his dagger, inflicting a serious wound on the rival, more severe than a mere scratch. Everyone quickly gathers around the elf, while Tama fears the dagger might be poisoned. Still alive, Astaroth smiles and assures that the elf won't be alone, as all humanity is destined to fall when true power returns. While saying this, the demon is petrified and dissipates into the air. Meanwhile, the poison in Aria's arm spreads and Cedric is sure it's dragon poison. Therefore, Howard places the wound on his shield and everyone rushes back to the city in search of treatment. When they return to Leonard, the doctor decrees that the poisoned one has only a day and a half to live, as no one has ever been able to neutralize a dragon's toxin. Although there is a method to be tried collecting the eye of an earth dragon. Although all members of the group are in favor of hunting the earth dragon, Cedric is against it as they don't have time for that and need to think of a quicker alternative. Amidst this, Aria screams deliriously with pain and distresses Tama, who decides to fly out the window. During his flight, he reflects on how his master is on the brink of death, just as he once was saved by her. For that reason, the behemoth is willing to do anything to repay the favor, even if it cost him his own life. With this in mind, he heads straight to the ruins where he reincarnated as an elemental cat and encounters the earth dragon he once had to face. Upon arriving in front of the enemy, Tama is asked about the reason for his return, having already fled once. Tama then declares that he will be the one to defeat the beast. In turn, the dragon laughs at the cat's audacity and assures him that he will pay for what he did to her left eye. Deep down, Tama knows he cannot defeat this enemy in his current form, so he decides to evolve once and for all into a behemoth. After gaining that monstrous body, Tama attacks with the roar of flames, but the dragoness barely feels the expected damage and counters massively, breaking the behemoth's guard with a headbutt and viciously biting his neck, nearly ending his life. With that, the earth dragoness is sure the battle is won, but this was part of Tama's plan. By making his rival lower her guard by feigning death, Tama retaliates with Flame Edge, lashing out at the enemy's eye with his fire-coated tail, ending the fight. Thus, Tama hurries to bring the eye to his master, but before he realizes it, his feline form returns. For a moment, the cat is puzzled by this situation, but knowing there's no time to dwell, he places the earth dragoness in his inventory and flies back to his friends. Shortly after, Aria was in her final phase of the poison spreading through her body, soon to be completely consumed. Vulcan wept copiously in the company of the other companions until a thunderous noise occurred outside along with the shaking of the earth itself. The adventurers rush to see what it is and spot the massive body of the earth dragon, with Tama wounded on top of it. Despite the strange scene, Cedric hurries the others, as time is short and cannot be wasted with questions at this moment. With that said, Aria receives treatment and amidst her unbearable pain, she dreams again of her traumatic past. When she was 13, her village was attacked by demons seeking the Philosopher's Stone, killing all the resisting inhabitants. Aria fled through the forest until a group of demons found her and demanded the stone's location. The elf will never forget the warm, uncomfortable sensation of that day, as she felt a warm, uncomfortable sensation as fear overcame her. However, as the demons advanced with their weapons drawn, an elemental cat appeared to oppose them. Reflecting on this, Aria believes it was that day she began to love cats. After the treatment, the elven warrior nearly lost her life but survived, and all her friends closely monitor the process, providing all necessary support. In turn, upon reuniting with her partner, Anna hugs Aria tightly and bursts into tears, convinced she would never see her again. Some time has passed since then, but as the toxin is powerful, Aria is still recovering slowly, not being 100% yet. Taking advantage of his master resting, Tama returns to the local dungeon and reflects that he was able to save Aria, but his behemoth form simply reverted without warning. Still, he considers himself lucky, for he used the transformation impulsively, even without fully understanding how it works. After Tama defeated the Earth Dragon, his evolution ability was no longer available to be used, but the dragon's powers were. For this reason, the cat went to the dungeon to test his new techniques. The first test subject was a minotaur, which, after having its club swing dodged by the cat, received a power called Dragon Claw, a spectral apparition of this gigantic beast that embeds its sharp nails into the back of the humanoid bull. Next, Tama uses Dragon Fang, a manifestation of the monster's mouth that briefly ensnares the Minotaur before releasing it to the ground. Seeing the result of his attack, Tama imagines he has rank-S abilities in his hands. As for the last of them, the Blessing of the Lion King, he intends to save it for another time. Suddenly, emerging from the shadows, human footsteps slowly approach the elemental cat, and as the light reveals her form, Tama notices it's a maiden. The woman says she finally found her strong man, while sniffing Tama's lost helmet. She asks why he returned to this cat form instead of continuing with the more powerful one. and the cat is confused by this person's behavior as she's certainly acting in a strangely familiar way. Finally, the woman breaks the helmet and leaps onto her target, who bolts without thinking twice and ends up finding a hole to burrow into as he was being chased by that scary figure. Although she didn't manage to reach him this time, she promises that she will find him again. Later, Tama arrives home and hides in his all-time favorite spot while questioning why that mad woman seems so familiar to him. In a way, those eyes remind him of the Earth Dragoness, and that sends chills down the feline's spine. The next day, Aria dresses her pet in an ideal outfit for a wonderful picnic in the park. When they arrive at the beautiful seaside field, after collecting fresh raspberries along the way, everything proceeds smoothly until Aria broaches the subject of her recovery. She had heard that when the body of the Earth Dragon was found, Tama was beside it, as wounded as it. For a moment, this makes the elf think it was her kitty that defeated the creature, but she laughs and doesn't mention it. Instead, she lies down on the grass and laments always having to be saved by someone, whether by Vulcan, by Cedric's group, or by anyone else. Talking about the attack on her homeland, Aria recalls that the demons had attacked that elemental cat, but when the little elf realized it, it was the Sword Saint who had killed that trio. Incidentally, without anyone else's help, that imposing figure was responsible for eliminating the entire invasion and restoring peace to the glowing village. Since that day, Aria has kept in her mind that she would also become a warrior, and when she reached a certain age, she bid farewell to her mother to leave home and start her journey. Aria swore she would be a powerful warrior capable of protecting the weak. However, that's not what has been happening. While highlighting this detail, the elf threatens to cry, so Tama sympathizes and rubs against his master's arm. Knowing her kitty so well, the woman imagines he's trying to cheer her up, saying it was her who defeated the demon Beryl Astaroth. Deep down, she understands that perhaps she is not the best at recognizing her own achievements. After the picnic, the pair head to Vulcan's workshop to pick up a shipment of equipment. Thanks to the reward for defeating Astaroth, combined with the sale of items collected from the trolls he commanded, Aria managed to amass a small fortune, enough to commission weapons and armor made from an excellent material or a chalcum. Despite its extreme durability, it keeps the gear quite light. So when she dons her new, well-crafted, modest armor, Aria feels the lightness of the material mixed with Tamahavan steel, providing extra protection. Later, the trio travels by boat to the dungeon. Mid-journey, Tama buffs the group with the blessing of the Lion King, granting resistance to fire and ice, and making their bodies lighter. With this, Aria is certain that her pet is concerned about her ongoing recovery and is doing everything to preserve her physical condition. During the expedition, when the team encounters a goblin ahead, Aria attacks without a second thought. Even without using her acceleration technique, her speed is so high that the monster can't keep up, losing its head before it realizes what's happening. After accomplishing this, the attacker celebrates the quality of her new equipment made by her blacksmith friend, as well as Tama's buff. However, malevolent laughter is heard once again. It's the mad damsel who chased Tama the day before. According to her, it's her and Tama's destiny to be together. Aria asks if she's an adventurer from Ruin, but Vulcan thinks her attire isn't appropriate for that. The mysterious woman replies that she was born from the shadows and knows neither a name nor Ruin, leading Vulcan to suspect she's suffering from amnesia. Thirsty, and with her tongue hanging out, the mad damsel seems very eager for the strong cat to impregnate her and is unafraid to make that clear. However, Aria replies that Tama is just a kitten and isn't yet capable of fathering offspring. When Tama retreats to the elf's melons, the pursuer realizes the pet has an owner and becomes frustrated. On the other hand, Aria offers the woman shelter, as she is clearly out of her mind, and being as lost as she is vulnerable to slavers who might capture her at any moment. The crazy lady asks if she can stay with the kitten if she goes with them, and Aria agrees but promises Tama she will never let her harm him. With that said, even though he's apprehensive, Tama recognizes his master's virtue. On the way home, Vulcan asks what the woman would like to be called, but she doesn't care much about the matter and lets them call her whatever they want. Looking at the sky, Aria gets the idea to name her Stella, a word that means beauty in her homeland. Seeing that the elf's kitten responds well to this name, the woman decides to adopt it and starts calling herself Stella. As soon as they get home and go to sleep, Tama hears Stella's voice, telling him to wake up, relieved that she can finally talk to the cat. However, the voice is inside his head, and she knows that the cat can speak the human language, as he said a few words when he killed her. Tama is confused, as the woman is very much alive in front of him, and the woman is offended not to be recognized, since they met twice in that labyrinth. With that, Tama realizes that Stella is the Earth Dragon. She recounts her story of appearing in this world in the depths of the dungeon, never needing anyone to tell her she was a powerful rank-S creature. From a young age, the Dragoness conflicted with other monsters, all of whom were far weaker than her, to the point where she thought no one could ever match her. That is, until the day she was defeated by a certain behemoth. Possessing a millennia-old resurrection ability, Stella got the chance to encounter the Strong One again, even if in another life. After being killed by Tama, the Dragoness was reborn as a human within the same labyrinth, took the clothes of a dead warrior, and found the lost helm of the elemental cat. Since then, the woman wandered through the dark dungeon in search of the one who defeated her. Hearing this, Tama considers that the Dragoness returned to seek revenge, but she explains that she has no intention of fighting, as she is in a state of submission to the victor. The great truth is that, having never met someone capable of defeating her, Stella is more in love with the one who was strong enough. With that said, the woman leaps at the creature in search of his bodily fluid, but Aria catches her pet and shields him, causing Stella to flee like a scared animal. The elf makes it clear that Tama is hers and has no intention of handing him over to anyone, so Stella decides to back off at least for today. Yet, through telepathy, she wants Tama to remember that she truly loves him. Hearing this, Tama looks at Stella and reflects that she looks human, but is a dragon inside, meaning they brought a real monster home. The next day, Stella is devouring everything in sight at breakfast, asking about each item she's about to pop into her mouth. Telepathically, the Dragoness asks Tama who this area is, sensing something special about her since, although she appears fragile and delicate, she controls a powerful creature like a behemoth. Tama explains that this elf is his savior and master, whom he is sworn to serve. Speaking of which, he asks the woman not to tell Aria that he's a behemoth, as it would drive them apart forever. To the Dragoness, this is music to her ears, so much so that she demands, in exchange for her silence, that Tama mate with her. However, she changes her mind, deciding not to rely on such low blackmail. Instead, she wants to win the feline over on her own merit. After breakfast, Aria takes Stella for a walk down the street to jog the dragon's memory. The elf asks if her new companion recalled anything about her life before they met, to which Stella mentions that she lived in battle. Hearing this, Aria believes the woman might have been an adventurer and wonders if she was surprised to meet the elf, as it brought back old memories. Stella admits she couldn't help being surprised, especially since the blonde has Tama as a pet. Listening to the conversation, the cat understands the Dragoness's position. As for monsters like her, the law of the strongest always applies. In other words, she must imagine that if Aria is Tama's master, then she must be stronger than him. To stimulate her friend's memories, Aria suggests they train on an adventure, and she likes the idea. Thus, they head to Vulcan, and Stella gets herself some armor. Honestly, the girls think she should consider something more robust, but the woman finds that heavy armor restricts movement too much, which she can't stand. Since that's the case, Aria suggests she at least wear a glove, but the Dragoness shows that her fists alone are ideal weapons when she begins a transformation, gaining dragon arms and a tail. With this, her partners discover she's a draconid, a rare type of human with dragon parts on her body. Enthralled, Vulcan rubs the Dragoness's tail as if it were a toy, forcing her to tell her to stop. The blacksmith apologizes, as it's a habit for her to fall for materials of such high quality. Hearing this, Stella confesses she's afraid of what this cat woman might do to produce her weapons. And speaking of which, it's her turn to choose a weapon for herself. Like a kid in a candy store, she heads to the weapon stand and digs around until she finds something worthwhile. By the way, Vulcan asks Aria how she's been doing with the new knives and mentions she can take a look at these weapons before they go. Just then, Stella had just found her ideal equipment for this training, a gigantic iron shield. Seeing that this woman is holding such a behemoth with one hand, everyone's jaws drop, especially Tama's, who thought that given Stella's temperament, she would prefer a sword or an axe, but a shield is something else. Telepathically, Stella confesses she never cared for that type of armament, but being killed by Tama taught her a lesson that we must always take care of our defense. Since the topic came up, the woman wants to know if the fact that he took her life bothers him, but she shares that she is grateful for it, as falling to the behemoth taught Stella what true strength means, along with love, of course. Finally, now it's time to find something to attack, because not even an adventurer lives by defense alone. In a hurry, Stella runs to choose her weapon like a child in a toy store, leaving the shield loose for Vulcan to hold and prevent its fall. Without delay, the Draconid finds a huge sword to try out, and Tama just wants to see where this will go. After the purchases, it's time to head to the dungeon and test Stella's real strength. At least she seems quite confident in her abilities, but still, Aria asks Tama to take care of the new companion. Vulcan announces that they should look for weak monsters to warm up, but Stella had already dashed ahead in search of the first challenge. Up ahead, she encounters a trio of goblins, so Aria and Vulcan tell Stella to stay back while they handle the danger, but instead, the Draconid simply tosses her weapons into the air on impulse, initiates her transformation, and violently tears open the chests of two enemies. Her colleagues stand agape at such power, while the sword and shield end in the ground after descending again. Remembering that her equipment exists, Stella decides to use the sword to finish off the last monster, and she does so without any mercy, in a blow so powerful that it shattered the poor creature. Then, with the blood of her enemies dripping down the blade of her sword, the woman screams that this is so much fun. Watching his companion after the victory, Tama reflects that he could expect no less from an earth dragon, but he truly hopes she doesn't stray along the way. Arya again mentions that there must be something to bring Stella's memories back even more now that she seemed to have fought on instinct. About this, Tama reflects that it was just a resurrection, but Stella really needs support. Speaking of her, the woman is trembling all over with the desire to face something stronger, so her partners think it's time to go down a floor to find bigger challenges. Next, they all go to the second floor, and the dragon faces a pair of orcs with a smile on her face. She tests the robustness of her shield by hitting the monsters hard with blows using this equipment. Watching the scene, Arya thinks that even this floor is too small a challenge for this lady. Because of this, they descend to the third floor where Stella has never been before. Vulcan and Arya try to explain something important to her before starting the training, but Stella ignores the two and leaps forward, waiting for new challengers. With that, she raises her head and notices the presence of a roper. Uncontrollably, the woman feels a huge repulsion for this weird creature, while Tama tells her that they have an extra advantage against female enemies, so Stella should retreat. Without a second thought, Stella vows to end this disgusting creature and lunges at it, but the roper catches her sword with its tentacles and sprays its dubious liquid onto the draconian's body. This sends her into a fury upon realizing what this beast has done to her. Seeing her react instinctively in desperation, Tama summons his own tentacles to protect his friends and restrain the roper. Having done that, he unleashes a water howl that pierces through the monster's body, ending the battle. Telepathically, the cat inquires why Stella lost her composure over such a weak monster, and she believes that her recent fight with Tama himself had destabilized her mind. For his part, Tama understands that he might not be in the best position to say this, since he was responsible for killing Stella, but he reassures her not to be afraid as he will protect her. She must continue training, he says, but now as a human, not a dragon. Moved by these beautiful words, Stella falls even deeper in love with the elemental kitty, but nevertheless, it also serves as a motivation for her to lift her head and take the hint. In the midst of this, Vulcan excitedly comments that their quartet will form a fine team, and Stella learns that this team business is about humans banding together for adventures. After all, alone they would easily fall, but together they draw strength from unity. Meanwhile, after being bound by her pet's tentacles, Arya is eager to repeat the experience and doesn't hide this from the cat, who is embarrassed and unsure how to please this particular lady. Anyway, the group moves on. Arya and Vulcan highlight that Stella will fit right in with them, and Tama shares this sentiment, as long as nothing out of the ordinary happens, of course. Later, Vulcan teaches some basic military tactics to Stella so she won't be so lost in the fray. She explains that with the right equipment, Stella will be the tank, the pillar of any group's defense, responsible for stepping forward and absorbing enemy attacks, and her sword will serve her well in striking back offensively. With this explained, the Drago finds it a great idea to be placed in the front line. As they resume their journey, Tama reflects that having Stella as the tank fits like a glove, allowing the others to focus more on their attacks and giving the elemental cat more freedom to act on the battlefield. That is, if everything goes as planned, since the draconian woman hasn't shown much tactical discipline so far. Speaking of which, upon spotting a group of orcs passing through the labyrinth, Stella bangs her shield with her sword to attract their attention. One orc charges at her, but the woman shatters his axe with her shield and counters with her sword, slicing off the monster's arm and sending him running in terror. Furious, the tank chases after her foe, while Tama laments his companion's behavior, although she's doing well for her first day of training. At that moment, he casts Lion King's blessing to buff his partners. Arya asks the cat not to forget about the tentacles, leaving the creature flabbergasted. Subsequently, the elf and the smith attack the orcs and knock them down one by one. After that, the group resumes their adventure and encounters a giant roper, which this time Stella was able to destroy without major issues. That day, she learned that fighting as a team is truly something special. Later, they head to the cave region where there's a kind of pool, and the Draconian doesn't waste time stripping down and diving into the water. Following suit, Vulcan and Arya join in, forcing Tama to maintain his honorable knightly vows. After the expedition, they go to the guild and introduce Stella to Anna, as they need to register her as an adventurer. However, before doing so, the receptionist introduces them to a man named Reese, who has come to make a request for Arya. Tama is excited to see that someone has come to make a personal request for his master, while the man explains that he would like the elf to protect some of his goods on a multi-day journey. He also invites Vulcan on the mission. She remembers she can't leave her shop closed for so long, but promises to try to finish all the work before the trip, so she could accompany her friend on the mission. Lastly, Stella asks what kind of goods they will be protecting, but since he cannot say there, Reese takes them to the warehouse to see for themselves. Arriving there, it turns out to be the skeleton of the Earth Dragon that he recently purchased at an auction, and Stella is speechless upon seeing her own body from her past life right before her eyes. Reese explains that this is the skeleton of a powerful creature that turned against its enemy. At least that's what it seemed to the merchant, prompting him to buy this merchandise. Seeing Stella fixated on the skeleton, Tama asks her through telepathy if she's okay, and she responds that it's strange because the moment she looked at it, she remembered being killed, which filled her heart with pain. Actually, the pain comes from the strong emotion she feels for the powerful Tama. At that moment, Anna arrives and before Area leaves, gives the elf a promotion tag for rank B. After that, the group sets off for the escort mission and Anna and Vulcan bid farewell to the travelers. Along the way, the adventurers encountered some dangers, but so far none have been able to stop the progress of the carriage as Area, Stella, and Tama did their jobs very well. At the end of the day, the group sets up camp and Reese hands Area some lily of the valley. Stella asks if the stuff is tasty, and the merchant explains that his wife, Eliza, loves these flowers and he used to pick them for her. Discovering the man has a wife, Tama understands why he has no eyes for his master. Area asks what he intends to do with the Earth Dragon's skeleton, and he thinks it's a great question. A nearby arms dealer had started accumulating rare materials because, according to him, a great war is about to begin. Upon hearing this, Tama remembers when Astaroth mentioned that a powerful creature had revived. Finally, Reese comments that they should arrive in Gladstone tomorrow, so it's best to rest. With that said, the group goes to sleep, but at a certain hour of the early morning, a phenomenon suddenly begins to take over the area. Tama runs outside his tent to try to understand what it is, as everything around was affected by it, except their camp, it seems. Area wakes up amid this, while Reese assures that the cargo is safe, as it is just the formation of a new labyrinth. Few people know this, but it's possible that a new dungeon can be spontaneously created in the middle of nowhere. Then the group continues on and crosses the fog that had been forming in the creation of the dungeon, and the merchant thinks they passed through safely. Area is relieved but confesses she would love to come back to explore. Meanwhile, Tama reflects that new labyrinths always have rare materials ready to be collected, all brand new. After moving away from the fog, Reese asks if the adventurers want to enter the labyrinth, as it's not every day you get the chance to explore such a newly formed place. Of course, it would be interesting if they agreed to sell the items they found there to him. The two get excited for the challenge, but the merchant asks them to keep their eyes open, as since this place did not exist until a few hours ago, no one knows what might be inside. Therefore, every caution is little. With this in mind, as they approach the fog, Tama activates the Divine Lion's protection to safeguard his team. With this buff, Stella feels she doesn't need to hold back against any threat and charges ahead, even as Area asks her to slow down. Wondering what to do to control this dragoness, the elf remembers Vulcan had written something in case she went off the rails. What was written was the following: Stella, if you fight by my side, I'll let you hug Tama once. Upon hearing these words, the Earth Dragon reincarnated quickly changes his mind and turns back, joining his allies once more and settling down, all for a chance to grab his favorite cat. In the midst of this, everyone hears feminine laughter around and a magical sphere appears asking if the adventurers are in search of the treasure. The orb asks to be followed, so Stella doesn't think twice before chasing after it, but the maximum projection carries the group into an ambush, where two giant monkeys advance on them. Stella does her job as a tank and taunts the enemies, making them focus on her. When one of the monkeys headbutts her shield, Area takes the opportunity and kills both monsters. Area praises the excellent teamwork of her companion, but she warns she didn't do it for the team, but specifically for Tama. In the midst of this, a nearby bush starts shaking and a feminine, innocent voice pretends that there's no one there. Stella orders the person to come out before they have to go after them, and two fairies emerge, both of completely different sizes. The small one introduces herself as Lily, a high fairy, while the larger one is Fairy, a high dryad. Stella asks what these creatures taste like, and Area explains that they are fairies that usually live in labyrinth forests, although she has never seen any in her life. Finally, she introduces herself to the duo, but the two only wanted to know about Tama and pick him up to pet him. Stella doesn't think this is fair and attacks the duo, but Tama asks her to calm down telepathically. The dragoness argues that these pests tried to kill the group by throwing them into a trap, but Lily responds that this isn't true. It turns out that she and Fairy only wanted to be friends with the elemental cat and wanted to show him the way to the treasure. Speaking of treasure, the Dryad reveals the grand item hidden behind this labyrinth. Upon opening the box, the group of adventurers discovers that is the exquisite flask of a potion that certainly seems very rare. Lily and Fairy tell that other treasures like this exist there, but to reach these items, the adventurers must obtain the key that is in that tree surrounded by a swarm of evil giant bees. By the way, they are attacked by the insects, forcing Stella to protect herself with her shield and Tama to react with the Either Howl, while Aria complements with the Whirlwind Cut, hitting all the bees in their path. After their victory, Fairy picks up Tama again, emphasizing how strong he is despite being so small and cute at the same time. Lily praises the cat's two companions, while Stella makes it clear she's the type who gets things done. Meanwhile, Aria retrieves a key from a tree and Lily and Fury explain that she will be responsible for opening the door to the labyrinth's boss, who guards the dungeon's main treasure. Aria imagines that this place must hold some very rare items and suggests the group should rest before proceeding, as they are tired from the long journey and unsure what lies ahead. At this point, the fairies ask to be taken to a human city, as they have always wanted to visit one. At dawn, the fairies are enchanted by their first visit to a city, and Aria asks them to stay close so they don't get lost. But the pair are so mesmerized that they run off towards the first enticing smell they detect. Consequently, the elf has to scold them, reminding them that they could be captured if they are careless, since fairies are rare and valuable. Finally, Aria announces it's time to head to Reese's store and see what they can find along the way, only to see the fairies escaping once more and grabbing a bowl of human food from a stall, which Stella insists on trying. The elf hurries to tell the stall owner she will pay for the food as he was losing patience. Then Fairy has the chance to try this food he had never seen before. Upon retrieving the rare item from the labyrinth, Reese is delighted to find it is the Tear of Truth, which prevents the person who consumes the liquid from lying. The merchant imagines it must have been a great effort to find this item, and Aria was about to explain the situation when the fairies burst into the room, acting like two mischievous children. Upon seeing them, Reese is somehow moved and apologizes for becoming emotional. But the truth is he had never seen fairies before. He then mentions he forgot to handle a matter and leaves without further explanation. Later, at bedtime, Stella approaches Tama to claim her reward, a hug from him. But the cat slaps the dragon human. However, this time even Aria admits her companion did a great job. Therefore, she asks her pet to grant just one hug. Reluctantly, Tama complies. At this moment, even Stella can hardly believe what she's about to achieve, so much so that she doesn't know how to claim her prize after such a long attempt. Finally, she pats the little creature and then enthusiastically sniffs his belly. Meanwhile, Vulcan approaches the escort group after finishing her work in the city, but is surprised by a skeleton emerging from the ground. As it poses no great challenge, the blacksmith easily crushes it with her hammer, but as a bell tolls, a purple energy envelops the scattered bones and Vulcan tries to understand what's happening. At that moment, the escort group reaches the boss's door and turns the key. Then the fighters enter the portal, leaving the fairies behind who cheer for their companions. Upon arriving on the other side, the team faces a rank B intent dragon, which quickly attacks with powerful magical projectiles, striking Stella's shield hard. But the tank doesn't back down, advancing despite the threat, hitting the dragon with her shield and drawing its attention to herself. Aria tries to take advantage of the distraction to flank the enemy, but it notices the tactic and throws its tail at the elf, forcing Stella to rush back to protect her ally with her shield. She ensures she will keep the beast busy, urging her companions to join the battle and resolve the situation. As she taunts the dragon as much as she can, Tama is impressed by what his partner has been capable of doing in such a short time with the group. Again, the tank explains that she's the type of person who resolves things. When the intent dragon attacks her with its claw, the woman grabs its entire arm and creates an opening in its guard that Tama knows he must quickly exploit. Without hesitation, he launches the flame howl and grabs the enemy with his tentacles, while Aria runs with acceleration and slashes its throat, inflicting a fatal wound that finally ends the fight and secures the victory for the invaders. Tama celebrates the fact they have killed their first boss and praises the master, while Stella boasts, claiming they couldn't have succeeded without her help. Then the group finds a treasure chest containing 2 scrolls. They are activated and transfer maximum energy into Aria's body. With this, she acquires an ancient ability called Sacred Blade. With the achievement, the group returns to the labyrinth forest in search of the fairies, but the two are not outside. Tama runs towards the bowl with the food Fairy was holding, fearing something bad has happened to them. Meanwhile, Reese rings his bell in his office and imagines it won't be long before some event begins as he looks at a portrait of Eliza, his wife. Hey guys, the source will be in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. See you.